Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to WillCast. Thank you for tuning in as always. I appreciate you liking, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff. And Matt from Red Delta Project, how's it going, my friend?
Hey, Will, it's great to be here on the podcast. Appreciate you having me.
I appreciate you taking your time to do this. Will you briefly, for the people who don't know who you are, give us a brief introduction to what you do?
Sure. So I have been in the fitness world for a little over 2 decades now and started off as kind of your general run-of-the-mill personal trainer working in the big gyms and doing the classic stuff. But over time, it has morphed into an obsession with making fitness as efficient and practical as possible, kind of for I hate to use the term, but the everyday man. Because when
Mm,
I got into fitness, I was very much involved with the idea of like, okay, it's got to be a full lifestyle. It's got to be the focus of everything you're doing, and chicken and rice and Tupperware containers, and you live your life in the gym and all that sort of thing. But over the years, I noticed that I'm not that kind of guy. I'm the type of individual who enjoys a healthy lifestyle, but I don't want it to make it the focus of my life. I'd rather still drink beer with my friends on a Friday night. And, if I'm really not feeling up to it, I can skip the occasional workout or just live life on my own terms. And the more I pursued that fitness lifestyle, the more I always felt like I was kind of playing this tug of war between the freedom and autonomy I wanted over my life and the rules that I had to follow in order to, be in shape.
mm.
So over the past 20 years, I've made it more of kind of an obsession on how does normal people get in shape without having to make their diet and their workout program the focus of their life and everything else has to take a back seat. How do you have a full-time job and taking care of the family and hobbies that keep you busy and everything else, and still find a way to make fitness work, not only pretty good, but in a very high level without having to feel like you have to compromise your quality of life for the sake of your fitness lifestyle or the other way around.
And so, is there actually? I'm gonna guess the answer is no, but is there a way to actually be as efficient and get results in fitness as much with the more enjoyable lifestyle, so to speak, as with the strict and following rules lifestyle?
Oh, absolutely. And it all boils down to getting the focal point on what is the most necessary aspects and the most fundamental principles of fitness that need to be adhered to. So it all started off when, I was really just focusing and trying to put as much as I could into following as many rules as possible when it came to diet and exercise. Like my workouts were 3 hours long and my diet was always super strict. And sorry, I can't join you friends for the barbecue because I've got to stick to my diet and all these other sorts of things. And at some point in my endeavors to make this happen, I started to question whether or not everything I was doing was actually necessary. Regardless of if it worked, I was always trying to
Mm.
follow things like, okay, does this program work? Or does this diet work? Or does this habit work? And usually the answer would be yes, as long as you put everything you had into it. But at some point, I stopped really focusing on, well, what works, and instead started asking, well, what's necessary? Like, is it necessary to live in the gym and do all these hard workouts? Is it necessary to never eat junk food and to always have, the chicken and rice in the Tupperware containers? Is it necessary to do these things? And inevitably, the answers that I kept coming across were no, it's not necessary to do that. You don't have to do that stuff if you don't want to. And so I went through a very kind of a rebellious phase initially where I was like, oh, you don't have to do this in your workout. You don't have to do that. You don't have to eat this way, kind of thing. But then eventually I started to come around to the idea of, okay, so almost none of the things we're told are necessary are actually necessary. Like I didn't have to follow almost all of the rules I thought I had to follow. So then I started to shift my focus more into, well, then what is necessary?
Mm.
What are the hard, true, fast rules that you do actually have to follow? And so over the years, I've learned about the fundamental principles that are absolutely necessary. And the great thing about understanding these things is once you get those dialed in and you understand them, then A, you've got a hell of a lot more of a straight shot to what results you want. B, you get to cut out all of the fluff that you don't want to do and you don't have to do and really isn't doing you any good. And that's most everything out there. And B, it gives you complete freedom and autonomy over your healthy lifestyle so you can do what you want to do and eat what you want to eat and train how you want to train and do things that are in alignment with your preferences, your resources, and your lifestyle. And not only is that a hell of a lot easier on mind, body, and lifestyle, but it's a lot more fun, it's a lot more enjoyable, and you don't have to make nearly as many hard sacrifices as you think you do in order to try and get in shape.
But surely it has to be depend on the person's goals, right? And the results they're seeking, I guess.
Yep. Oh, absolutely, for sure. And that's why one of the most important things to always start off with is what do you want? And the more clearly you can identify what you want to achieve out of your habits, the easier it is to do this because most exercise is not going to be worth your time. Most dietary tactics are not going to be worth your time. It's kind of like walking into a grocery store and you're like, okay, I need chunky peanut butter and a gallon of milk. Well, there's thousands of items in a grocery store, and they're all vying for your attention with flashy ads and everything, but almost none of it is what you want or need. It doesn't mean it's bad, it's just not what you need. So the more clearly you can define exactly what you want to accomplish, the more you can say no to the 99.9% of the stuff out there and focus on that small percentage of habits that's going to get you much more directed towards your goals. And when you get really refined into that objective, it's amazing how little it takes in order to get what you want out of things. And you're not really having to waste a lot of time and money and energy on the things that they're not bad, but it's just not really what you really need. Now, a lot of times when people start off in fitness, they may not have that clarity, or they may, I don't know, I just want to be fit. I don't know, I just want to be in better shape. They
Super
don't really,
broad goals.
yeah, it's super broad. And in that case, I usually tell people, well, don't worry about what you're doing. Just do anything. Because when you don't have a very clear objective, you don't need specific diet and exercise plans. Just do whatever kind of goes in the direction you want. Like, obviously, you're not eating junk food all the time, but you don't need specific plans or habits and routines when you don't have specific goals. That's why a lot of things that have grown in a lot of popularity over the years, like F45, Orange Theory, CrossFit, that sort of stuff, that's kind of like just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and just see what sticks kind of approach. You don't really care what you're getting. You just want to kind of get general overall kind of fitness. So if you don't really care what you're getting, just do whatever and don't worry too much about it. But when you get more experience, inevitably you're like, yeah, I don't really care about X. It just doesn't jive with me if I can do this thing or that thing. And the more you get that experience, the more refined you can be in your goals. And then you can start saying, okay, I don't care about like being able to run a marathon. I don't care about long endurance cardio. So then someone's like, hey, here's our couch to half marathon program. I'm like, yeah, I don't need that. It doesn't mean it's bad or anything. It's just not for you because you just don't care. And if you don't care, then it really isn't that important.
So there's a fine balance, of course, and because my immediate thought would be that when you tell people this, that go from being extremely strict with their diet, for example, they might go absolutely crazy. Oh, I don't need to stick to broccoli, rice, and chicken. Do you experience people going crazy with junk food, eating bad and healthy, like going the exact opposite way instead of finding a balance?
Actually, it's quite the opposite. So and sometimes this will happen when I'm at a social setting or something, and people will see that, I'm drinking beer and I'm eating these cookies and kind of thing. And they're like, what? This is ridiculous. Like, you're in fitness, you're setting a bad example kind of thing. And I'll start to kind of tease a little bit like, no, it's not really that important that you totally abstain from these things. It's not necessary all the time and stuff. And a lot of people actually really push back on that because what the extreme habits give us is a sense of security about things,
Mm.
because we're getting involved in fitness because we want more control over our body, how it looks, feels, performs. And a lot of times there's a lot of insecurity over things. So when I suggest things like, no, you don't have to completely eat clean all of the time, that's a very scary concept to a lot of people. It's not hopeful for a lot of folks. Instead, they're like, oh, I'm sure if I give just an inch, I'm going to just eat total junk food and be lazy and watch TV and video games all day long. And I'm never going to go to the gym. I have to be 100% strict 100% of the time. Otherwise, I'm going to go completely off the rails. And so that's why a lot of times the opposite is the case, where people will say, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I don't want any part of that. I don't want any part of loosening up my diet just a little bit or giving myself any leniency aside from the total straight and narrow, because it gives them a sense of control. It gives them a sense of security away from whatever they fear about health or weight gain or whatever. But the ironic thing is that they don't really have nearly as much control as they think they do, because the more we try to force ourselves to stay on that straight, narrow path, the less we're actually making disciplined decisions. It's like, oh, I never miss a workout. I always force myself to work out. It's like, are you really in control if you're not actually making choices, but you're just following the
Ah,
rules?
that's very interesting.
Yeah, because I could draft up something like, okay, Will, you're going to work out an hour every single day. Here's exactly what you do, how you do it. Don't ever stop doing that. You have to do it exactly like this, no matter what. Okay, that's fine, but I've totally taken the control out of your hands.
Yeah.
You're not in control because you're 100% obedient to what I'm telling you to do, which isn't always a bad thing, especially when we're starting off. We may need that guidance, but inevitably life changes. So you may be like, okay, my schedule's changing. I don't have this time, or now I'm getting sick and now I've got this injury, and oh, this exercise doesn't quite seem what I'm doing. I think I'd rather do this other thing. And I'd be like, no, you have to follow these rules exactly as I write them down, kind of thing. And the fact is, if you're not actually making choices, you're not in control. But when you make the choice of, okay, today I'm really not feeling my best. The kids are going crazy. I have no time and everything. I really just don't think it's in my best interest to force this workout today. I think I'm going to be better off doing it tomorrow when I've got more rest and more time and more energy and more, if you're making that choice, that's a decision. That's discipline. A lot of times people think that being disciplined is all about forcing yourself to do something you don't want to do. That's not discipline. That's obedience. It's completely the opposite. An obedient person does what they're told to do, regardless of whether or not it's the best thing to do. It's like, this is what I say, you do it, regardless of the circumstances. That's obedience. That's not discipline. Discipline is when you look at your circumstances and you're like, based on this and this, and my experience says this, I'm better off doing this and making this change. Sometimes it could be saying, all right, usually I do 3 sets, but today, feeling great and awesome, let's do 5. Let's go for it. Let's rock and roll. But other days it could be like, man, that's not working for me. My elbows are killing me. Instead of 3, I'm just going to do 1 set of everything, get the blood flowing, and then go home. That's not being weak. That's called discipline, because you're making better choices for yourself. And so, again, coming back to what we want, when you know the objectives you're trying to go after, you can make far better disciplined decisions on what's actually better for you, rather than just staying on this straight and narrow that someone has arbitrarily guessed is the best thing for you.
That's very interesting. And I guess going from people who are overly disciplined, I've always wondered why some people can't find any discipline at all.
Mm-hmm.
How do you talk to people, or try to guide people, I guess, or give advice to people who just can't seem to find that discipline? Is it because they just don't want it bad enough?
Well, sometimes that really is the case. Yeah. When it comes down to having that motivation to keep doing things, there's several things that kind of need to be considered. Again, it's not about forcing yourself to do something, but fundamentally, we humans are always kind of basing our choices and our motivations off of a cost to benefit ratio. You give someone something that has a huge amount of benefit with relatively low cost, and they'll stick to it no matter what. They'll love to do it. They'll be motivated every single day to give it everything they've got. So let's say, going and getting your workout in. If you're feeling like you're getting a huge amount of benefit from it, and the cost of doing it is relatively low, you'll be motivated like crazy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When someone's like, I just can't seem to work out, I just can't seem to get things going on. Well, what's going on is their perceived benefit and the perceived cost is getting a little bit more on the other side of the scale. And so there's several reasons this could be happening. The first of which is, like you said, like, yeah, sometimes they just don't want it that big a deal. Like for some people, building muscle and being stronger and stuff is one of the most important things in their life. Now, I don't know why this is the case for me, but I don't want to be stronger and more fit. For some reason, when I was a younger, like teenager, and so I got the fitness bug when I was 13, and I had a switch flip in my brain, and it was not something I wanted. It is something I absolutely have to have in my life. It is life and death. I need to be physically active to the same degree. I need to breathe air and drink water and socialize with friends. It's not a luxury for me. It is a 100% life and death necessity. But other people, it's like, well, yeah, that'd be cool if, I had abs. It'd be neat. But that's all there is to it. So in that regard, the emotional drive to have it is just not as high.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to be honest with it. We have to be real that, yeah, it's just not that big a deal. It's like this with everything. For some people, I'm trying to think of an analogy outside. I always make a lot of car analogies for my car, but for some people, their car is their absolute pride and joy. You get a tiny scratch on that thing and they're like, it's got to go to the shop. It has to be fixed. It has to be perfect all the time. And other people, they've got trash in their car and it's got dents and rust and everything. And it's like, oh, I haven't changed the oil in like a year and a half. And they're like, yeah, whatever, as long as it gets me to work, that's all I need. And it's the same thing with fitness. For some people, it's just super important and it's their lifeblood. Other people, it's like, whatever. And in that case, okay, so the amount of benefit may not be that high, but it's always the benefit to cost ratio we have to consider. So that cost is also the other side of the coin, where you could have a lot of motivation, but if to desire to have something, but if the cost is perceived to be super high, you're still not going to want to do it. And that's why so many of my methods are also about getting that perceived cost as low as possible. So it takes less time, less energy, less effort, less money, because even if you're someone who's like, it'd be kind of cool to be in better shape, if you can keep the costs relatively low, you'll still have tons of motivation to do it. Because you're like, yeah, working out, I get some benefit from it, but it takes me almost nothing in order to get that workout in, then you'll still have motivation. But you could be someone who's like, I really do want this, but the costs are so high, it doesn't matter how much you want it. The costs are still too much. It doesn't matter how much you want it. It's still prohibitively expensive. So we bring those costs down. And again, this oftentimes comes down to what is most important, what is your objective. So you can cut out all of the fluff and stuff that's wasting your time and money and energy and effort. So the cost goes down and your perceived rate of benefit is the thing that's much higher.
I also think there's a lot about instant gratification, especially in today's age where people have a long time or hard time seeing the long-term benefits. So if they don't see instant benefits right now, they will perceive the work it takes to get that thing as much higher, even though it might be a lot better in the long run for them.
Exactly. And that's why I'm a very big fan of using instant gratification for our benefit rather than our detriment. Because we need, as far as that cost to benefit ratio, I'm all about let's get as many benefits as you can. Let's get as much out of this as possible. Now, a lot of times we get fixated on, yeah, I want to lose weight. And yeah, I want to build muscle and whatnot. It's like, okay, very good. Yeah, those are good things. But let's get so much more out of it. How much more can we get out of it? So, for example, if you hate going to the gym, and you're like, it's the worst place for me, I hate going to it, that's a very high perceived cost, right? To the benefit. But if you're like, dude, I love going to the gym. Oh, there's no better place. Well, that's a perceived benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So you're using it to your advantage. And that's why when we get down to what we want and understanding the fundamentals in getting what we want, we have the freedom to choose the methods at will. So if you came to me and you're like, I hate going to the gym, it's the worst place for, I don't ever want to go there, but I love going outside. I'm like, well, then we won't go to the gym. Let's go outside. Like, there's nothing I like better than going out and hiking in the woods. I'm like, well, then do that, because you're getting the instant gratification of getting out in nature, and oh, I love being out in the fresh air, and oh, it just does me so much good to see this beautiful view as I'm hiking the Rockies and stuff. Good, instant gratification. We want that. We want things that make us feel good now.
Mm.
We want things that give us some sort of benefit in some way, shape, and form today. So that way we have the motivation to stick with the habits on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, the long-term stuff that we want, building muscle, losing weight and stuff, great, good. But if you're basing things solely on long-term gratification and the instant gratification is lacking, you're probably not going to be motivated to stick to it. And you can tell yourself it'll be worth it down the road, it'll be worth it 10 years from now or whatever. That's great, but it also needs to be worth it today.
Mm.
It needs to be worth it now. Because if you can get that instant gratification that's in alignment with your long-term goals, then you're unstoppable,
Yeah.
because you're getting that perceived benefit much higher on a daily, weekly, monthly, and annual basis.
Mm-hmm. So, do you also use instant gratification as a strategy for example, not eating as strictly? So, allowing yourself to have pizza once a week, for example. So you have these small instant gratifications while also the rest of the week working on your long-term goals, for example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it comes down to benefits and perceived rewards and stuff. And so this kind of goes along with when you were saying earlier, like some people that just don't seem to have a motivation to do things. Well, in that regard, I'll look at a couple things. One is the methods that they're using. Like they could have a lot of motivation to eat better, but if they don't like the diet they're on, like, oh, I can't stand eating broccoli one more day. It's like, okay, so the method is not in alignment with your preferences and your resources and stuff. Well, the good news is there's a million ways you can achieve everything in fitness. There's no good reason to force yourself to stick to any one thing that you just don't like doing. I always say it's like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet. Like in Vegas, you've got this massive buffet. You're like, I need a good protein hit after my workout, and I hate seafood, so I'm going to eat nothing but crab legs and salmon and scallops, and be like, why?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's got protein. I'm like, so does a million other things. Why are you forcing yourself to do this one thing you hate doing? I've got a million ways to burn fat and calories. I got a million ways to build muscle. If there's this one thing that you just don't like doing for whatever reason, stop doing that thing. But if you're like, but I'd much rather do this other thing, well, then do that instead. So that's one of the big reasons why people lose the drive to do things, is they're just working with methods that are not a good fit for them. But the other more deeper reason why a lot of people struggle is sometimes because they have a lot of deep subconscious barriers between where they are now and where they want to go. And takes a lot of little introspection in order to make it happen. But you'll find this sometimes where people will be like, oh, I want to lose weight. It'd be so great if I could just finally get rid of this gut and stuff. But then we just spend time with them and they're making fun of people in the gym who are better physiques. Like, oh, look at these shallow narcissistic bodybuilders. Like they're so egotistical. God, big doofus caveman and stuff. They're like, you have this emotional negativity for the very result you're trying to achieve. Or I was training one gal one time, and she was, every workout we did, it was like pulling teeth to get her to just put in any effort. I'd be like, okay, we're going to go and we're going to use the battle ropes. And she'd be like, oh, fine. All right, let's get this over with. And very, very negative about things. And then one day I was just kind of saying, I'm going off on a limb here, but I'm willing to bet you weren't an athlete in school. And she was like, "Oh God, no, no! I hated those stupid jocks, and all those little prissy girls that played field hockey." And she's just going off on this rant about all of these people who had athletic qualities and how she made fun of them, and they were like the bane of her existence when she was younger. And now that she was trying to get in shape, and I'm like, okay, time to do athletic things. That emotional drive not to do those things was still very deep
Mm.
seated. So she equated everything she was doing with those emotions she had. And which point it's like, okay, well, it's time to do a lot of deep digging as to why you have these negative connotations with this thing, and then assessing that and regging it up. Because if you have this negative perception of a type of activity or a person who gets that goal, your subconscious will never let you succeed. It'll self sabotage you at every step of the way. And I know because everything I love doing now is something I used to hate to
Hmm.
do. I
That's
used to
interesting.
think it was the stupidest thing. Like I'm a backcountry skier, right? And so we put skins on our skis and we hike up mountains and then we ski down. I used to think that was the stupidest thing in the world. And I knew a few backcountry skiers back when I lived in Vermont, and they were always like crunchy, hippie types who like were driving rusty cars. And, I had this image in my mind of what a backcountry skier was all about. So when my buddy kind of got into it, I was like, God, that's the stupidest thing in the world. And I fought him tooth and nail whenever we try and do it. But after I experienced the joy of it and how great it can be, my perception of the type of person and what it meant to do it changed. And the second I felt differently about it, everything was way different.
Mm.
And that's why it's always important to recognize that how we feel about things is in charge. I don't care what you know about diet. I don't care what you know about exercise. How you feel about going to the gym is going to be the determining thing on whether or not you go to the gym.
Yeah.
You can read motivation posts all day long about, nutrition and have 5 PhDs in healthy eating and stuff. But if Mary brings in a box of donuts on a Friday morning to the office, how you feel in that moment about those donuts is going to determine whether or not you're eating a bunch of donuts.
Mm.
So that's why we have to be aware of how do we feel about the objective? How do we honestly feel about the methods? And if we have a lot of negativity about the method or about the objectives, we either need to use a different method or have a different objective, or kind of do a little bit of subconscious reworking and realizing, okay, maybe I don't need to be so negative about that sort of thing. Maybe I've got this thing wrong, like I did with backcountry skiing, and seeing it in a different light. Because if you can feel differently about things, it's a complete game changer.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. Do you do anything that you really dislike right now, though, for the sake of some sort of reward, either now or in the future?
Not really.
Hmm.
Pretty much everything I do, I want to do. But it should be said, of course, that it's not a all or nothing thing. Like, for example, I've gotten back into formal martial arts training these days, and the only classes that I can get to are relatively late at night on Monday and Thursday, and they're a bit of a drive away, and I'm tired every time. So believe me, every single time I go to my Taekwondo class, there's certainly a part of me that's like, oh, okay, well, let's here we go. Kind of not feeling this right now, but we got to make this happen, kind of thing. And I won't lie, like last Monday, it was Halloween. And because it was Halloween, we didn't have class. And there was definitely a little part of me that was like, woohoo, like I got the night off, yay, kind of thing. But at the same time, that's a relatively small part of me. And there's a much bigger part of me that's like, yes, I'm finally getting back into formal training. I'm finally feeling better about my kicks. I'm really feeling like I'm getting these techniques down a lot better. So it's never all in or all out. It's always a percentage. So to that regard, of course, every time I jump on that pull-up bar or every time I'm down on the floor to do push-ups, there's at least some part of me that's like, I kind of don't want to do this. But there's a much bigger part of me that certainly is all about it and is glad I'm doing it. And if I ever do find myself chronically like, I just don't want to do this, it's like, okay, we don't really want to do this. Let's look at why. and chances are very good I probably shouldn't be doing it. That it's probably not something I should be doing. I'm probably better off not doing it.
Hmm.
Because as I tell people, a loss of motivation is usually a sign that what you're doing isn't worth it, that it's not paying off. We all have these acute little moments where you're like, I just don't feel like working out today, kind of thing. And it comes and it goes and it passes. That happens to everybody. That's perfectly fine. But I always tell my clients, if you're chronically not feeling something, like I just really don't want to do this thing this way, tell me, because that usually means it's not very effective. The payoff isn't worth it. A loss of motivation is our emotional subconscious literally telling us this habit is not paying off for you. It's the benefits are not worth the costs. So in that regards, you probably should be doing something different, or we need to reassess our goals. I mean, like a lot of times people will have a goal hijack where they're like, oh, I just want to, be able to, like their objective is to like bench press 225 or something. And so like, okay, let's do that. We'll work on getting them to that goal. But their motivation's going down and they're like, I'm not feeling it and stuff. But then if we really dig underneath their layers a little bit, they're like, honestly, I really don't care how much I bench press. I just want a bigger chest. I just want to build my chest up. They're like, oh, well, in that regard, we've got a million ways I can build up your chest. We could do it with the bench press, but if it's not feeling it for you and it's not really your thing, well, then let's not bench press. We've got 100 other things we could do. And eventually we may find something like, oh man, I don't know why, but these dips feel amazing. I love these things. Then we'll do that.
Hmm.
Then we'll do that. There's no good reason to force yourself to do something you don't want to do when you don't have to do it. And you got other options that are probably going to be a better option for you.
Yeah, and I think also if you feel like something is not rewarding enough, it's probably also because the reward is probably smaller, because when you don't want to do something, you are not putting 100% of yourself into it. So the reward will literally be smaller.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Exactly. And so sometimes it's about building up the total amount of benefit from various sources too. So if we get too tunnel visioned into I'm doing this just to lose weight or I'm doing this just to build this muscle, it's like, okay, that's good. That's perfectly fine. But for me personally, I've always had much more motivation to do things that have multiple benefits to it. So, like if I go backcountry skiing, sure, I'm burning a good amount of calories to it. Sure, it's good for my cardio. Yeah. Is that really entirely why I do that? No, of course not. I love the sport. I love getting out in nature. I love the social aspect of it. I love using the equipment. I love how it feels when I'm getting it some perfect turns. I mean, I could go on and on and on all of the things I enjoy about backcountry skiing. So there's no one reason why I'm doing it. It's many things. And that's key because some days the weather sucks. Some days I'm not feeling my best or I'm doing it solo and, but keeping it safe kind of thing. So when you have many reasons why you do something, when some of those reasons inevitably just are not working for that day or even a longer period of time, the other reasons are still enough to keep doing it. But when you only have one reason you're doing something and that's not fulfilling its end of the bargain, then your motivation and your reason to do it will plummet and you're probably not going to end up doing it.
Hmm. What you're saying is super interesting, because surely there is always going to be something you just have to do that you don't enjoy in life, like doing your taxes, cleaning, doing the dishes, so on. Would
Yep.
you would
Yep.
you say that you should reprogram your mind to enjoy those things, or is that the actual discipline that it's discipline you need for that?
Yeah. And a lot of times we can just kind of farm this stuff out. Like, for example, a lot of people do not like workout programming. They're like, I don't like figuring out what I'm going to do. I used to train a guy who was very fit, very well versed in fitness. He knew all the exercises and stuff. And I asked him one day, I was like, Tom, why do you hire, like, you know, all these exercises, you know this stuff. Why don't you just do this on your own? And he was a very high level executive here in Colorado. And he's like, Matt, to be honest with you, I just don't want to have to think about this stuff. Like
Mm.
I come into the gym, I don't want to think about what I need to do and what's the weight and how many sets and how many. I just want you to freaking tell me what to do. That's all I want you to do. Just tell me what to do. And that's why I'm hiring. So he farmed it out. He didn't like that aspect of fitness. So he hired me to take care of it for him. Or, we could have some aspects of our lifestyle that it's like, okay, I have to do this thing. I can't farm it out. Like no one can exercise for you.
Mm.
Nobody can, make your muscle work for you kind of thing. So in that regard, I would say, yeah, but what's the minimum effective dose you need in order to do this? Because in my experience, most people are putting in way more work than necessary, way more work effort. Like this one guy, one time I was training, and he was working out, and I started my workout, and then I went over to just say hi to him and stuff, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've got this going on and back by and da, da, da." And he's like, "Well, I'll let you get back to your workout." And I was like, "No, I'm done. I'm good." And he's like, "You started after me and you're done before me." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I just know the minimum of what I need to do. And if I'm up for more, I'll do more, but I'm not going to do more work than necessary." And I think in our fitness culture, there's this very big drive of more, 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 more. But this is usually, again, a fear based, insecure approach to training that is used by people who don't know what they're doing, because that's exactly what I used to do. I used to work my tail off in the gym. I used to have long workouts and set after set and many different exercises because I didn't understand what I wanted to get out of the workout. But now that I know much more clearly what I need, I can literally be like, I can get what I want in 5 minutes out of this.
Mm.
When I wrote my book, Micro Workouts, that's the whole approach to it is what do you want and how do you get that as quickly as possible? Because hard work is one of the most overrated things in life. Like people are like, I can outwork everybody in this room kind of thing. I'm like, that sucks. It's like,
Mm.
I don't want to be the hardest worker in the room. I don't want to be the hardest worker in the gym. I want to be the most productive worker in the gym. And oftentimes being productive means knowing exactly what you need to do and usually finding how to get that done with as little work as possible. And I tell people I can get more done in 10 minutes than I used to do in 3 hours as far as an effective workout. Not because I found some sort of hack or anything, but I'm clear on what I'm trying to accomplish. And I've cut out all the fluff and I'm very focused on making that happen. And when you can do that, you can get it done in pretty quick order.
Mm. I saw this is getting into a bit of a different topic, I guess. I saw one of your videos about stretching and how doing isometrics both works the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Can you
Mm-hmm.
get a bit into that? Because I've been stretching almost every day for the past year, and I really wanna. I have a goal of getting the splits, so I would love
Mm,
some new
yeah.
new tips on that.
Sure. Did you try that exercise that I gave in the video where you reach down towards your toes
With
and then
the hands between the knees. I
yeah,
have not
yeah,
done that yet. I literally just saw the video before we talked, actually. So
sure.
yeah.
That's such a weird thing to experience, and to those listening, it's really easy to do. So basically, just kind of like bend over, try to touch your toes, stretching your hamstrings, and then hold it for a few moments, and then take your fists, put them next to each other, and squeeze your fists between your knees. And then after about 5 seconds of that, then go back into the stretch, and you're going to find you can get way deeper from that. And it's just a little quirky party trick that I learned at a conference one time, but it illustrates the point that when we're looking at how our muscles are working, our muscles are driven by our nervous system. It's not driven by the exercise you do or the weight in your hand or anything like that. Those are just the vehicles, right? Your muscles and how they perform and act and behave are driven by your nervous system. So, training the nervous system is a far more direct way to get the muscles into the condition we want and need them to be. And one of the quickest and easiest ways to do that is with the discipline of overcoming isometrics. That's when you're putting force against something that you can't move. Classic example would be like if you got into a squat rack and there's the barbell about chest height, and you load it up with like a gazillion pounds that you couldn't possibly lift, and then you just push your back against it as hard as you possibly could. That's an overcoming isometric, as opposed to a yielding isometric where you'd take like 135 on the squat rack, you'd squat down and hold it there. You have a finite amount of resistance. So, and that's great. But an overcoming isometric is one where you're always matching force and resistance equally. So the harder you push into that immovable force, the more it pushes back and vice versa. So the beauty of overcoming isometrics is that it is a very quick and very efficient way to train your nervous system to use your muscles better in every way, shape, and form: strength, connectivity, synergy, stability, balance, like everything. But a lot of times when it comes to the mobility component, the mobility of our muscles depends very much on how well you can contract the muscle and how well they are stable in a position. Because if we are trying to improve our mobility, we need to create a very stable environment that the muscle feels confident in. As a physical therapist friend of mine always said, muscles are like dogs. When they're big and they're strong, they're just silent and they're confident. They're like, woof, like I could take you, no big deal kind of thing. But when they're small and they're tiny and they're weak, they make a lot of noise, like the little, Chihuahua dog, like kind of thing. So you'll find that your biggest, strongest muscles that you've inevitably trained over the years, those are usually also the most mobile muscles. Those are the ones that are the easiest to get into a stretch. My calves are a big example for that. My chest, if I get into a chest stretch, I can just feel that stretch, really big, open, mobile. Oh, that feels real good kind of thing, because they're big and they're strong and they're confident. But my hips, on the other hand, are tight as hell because they're small, tight, and weak, just because I haven't really used them a whole lot. So being able to engage the muscles at will with a lot of force, ironically enough, is the pathway to building up what I call that muscle confidence. And the more confident the muscles are, the easier they are to stretch, the easier they are to use at elongated lengths, and the more mobile they're inevitably going to be.
That's so cool. I've never heard this before. What kind of isometric could I do in between my splits, for example?
So a lot of times the adduction for the splits is also a touch hamstring related, because you've got quite a bit of adductors, and many of the adductors in your legs are also either hip flexors or hip extensors as well. So a lot of times that's why splits alone don't really do a whole lot for a lot of people, because if you also have weak extension and flexion, which is most people because we sit a lot, then you're always going to be at a bit of a loss, because you're working on one plane of motion, but you need multiple planes of motion to a degree. If you want to look up the anatomy, you've got your adductor magnus, which is one of the biggest adductors you've got. That's also an extensor. So if you're doing things like deadlifts and stuff, that's heavily involved with that. You've got your adductor magnus, I just mentioned, brevis and longus, which are more in the front or the anterior side of your humerus, and that also aids in flexion. And so a good thing that you might want to try is with the overcoming isometrics of just pushing your leg against a wall. Try and explain this. So you're going to face the wall, and you're going to stand about 2 feet away from it. And you're going to have both your legs straight. You're going to push your toes of one leg up into the wall about a foot above foot high up on the wall. And that's your flexors. So you're going to have that working. That's your flexors. You're going to feel your tensor fasciae lata really work up. It's really good for like IT band issues as well. But that's also going to get your adductor longus and brevis. And so that's going to warm those up. Then you face your back to the wall and you push your heel against the wall. And that's going to also get that adductor magnus. And so you also might want to have a slight squeezing impact with your feet as well. So you're not just pushing straight into the wall, but you're kind of almost squeezing your feet together a little bit. Actually, now that I think about it, an easier way to do this might just to be to stand. Like you could do this anytime. Stand with your feet about shoulder width apart. put your toes apart from each other so they're pointing out slightly, and just squeeze the floor as hard as you can. And that's going to get your adductor magnus to a large degree.
Ah.
And then just point your toes in a little bit and squeeze, and that'll get your longus and your brevis. And that's just going to be a good overcoming isometric for your adductors. And then you just practice that throughout the day. I can even do it now as I'm talking to you because you're just standing there.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do that, that'll improve that tension control in those muscles. Then, with that strength and that confidence, when you're doing your splits, you should notice it's going to be a much more of an easier stretch as opposed to if the muscle is not all that strong as far as that neural drive goes. You're going to notice it's not really so much of a stretch. It's kind of like you've hit a limit. Like you're moving your legs out and there's just this very hard stop. It doesn't feel like you're stretching a rubber band. It's kind of like you're just trying to pull apart a hockey puck.
Mm.
It doesn't stretch. It just stops. And I always told this to friends. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with my mobility. Like, because they say stretch, but it doesn't feel like a stretch. It just feels like I'm hitting a limit, a hard limit, and that's it. So the stronger you can make your muscles and the more you can get that neural drive to improve that muscular confidence, the more your muscles are going to be comfortable stretching. And the more comfortable they are stretching, the more confident they are, the more they will allow the stretch to happen. And you're going to get a much deeper squat as well, or split as well. This is why you often find people who are the most mobile are also the strongest in those areas.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this guy can do splits. What does he do? He's an Olympic lifter, or he's doing some sort of acrobatic movements that require super deep, squats and stuff because he needs to be strong and mobile. So strength and mobility, they go hand in hand because they're both driven by your nervous system.
I'm always so fascinated when I see like these huge guys. Like, do you know Jujimufu?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like he's giant and he has this amazing flexibility with his splits. So he's probably pretty strong in his legs too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There's videos of him squatting gargantuan amounts of weight. And it's kind of like a, chicken and egg thing. Like mobility begets strength to a degree because the more mobile you are, the deeper you can get, the
Yeah.
more range you can get, which forces the muscles to work harder in a lot of exercises. But the stronger you are, the more mobile you can be. So it's a cyclical thing. And it goes forward and backwards too. That's why, like with my hips, if they're tight and they're weak, it's really hard to get them to work well. But if you can get them stronger, then they can be more mobile. And that's again where the overcoming isometrics comes in, is because it's the easiest way to just get your muscles to work more and more effectively. And so if you can do that, that kind of opens the door. And now you can make it easier to work the muscle. You can work the muscle better. You can stretch it better. You stretch it better. You can get more mobile. And it's now a positive feedback loop rather than a negative one.
Ah, amazing. I'm going to try those isometrics for sure. And I'm excited to see where it's going to take my split.
Sure. I'll make a video, a quick, short video on my Instagram demonstrating them
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
later today. So that way you'll have a reference for it.
Awesome. Matt, where can people find you on social media and
Anything
your
Red
work?
Delta Project. I'm on YouTube, Red Delta Project, Instagram, TikTok, all that, Red Delta Project. RedDeltaProject.com is the website with lots of free ebooks and stuff like that. Hell, if you search on Amazon for my books and stuff, it'll come up Red Delta Project as well, or my name, Matt Schifferly. But anything you Google, it'll pop up.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. This was a pleasure.
Will, thank you so much, man. It's great talking with you.
And thanks to the listeners as always. Thank you for tuning in, liking, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff. Take it easy. Peace.